Welcome to the New South Wales Electoral Commission candidate presentation for local council by-elections. This presentation will cover the by-election for Mayor or the by-election of one or more councillors. Candidate Information Seminar Part 4. The presentations are in 4 parts. In Part 1, we covered electoral rolls, registration and nomination process and the ballot paper draw. In Part 2, we covered electoral material, and in Part 3, we covered election campaign finance management. Part 4 will cover voting, vote counting and results, disclosure of donations and expenditure, allegations and offences. Overview. This presentation is intended to assist individual candidates and political parties contesting local council elections that are conducted by the New South Wales Electoral Commissioner. If the election for your council is not being conducted by the Electoral Commissioner, go to our website for information on the registration process and the management and disclosure of election campaign finances. The address is www.elections.nsw.gov.au/FD. The information in this presentation is based on legislation and policies of the Electoral Commissioner and the New South Wales Electoral Commission as at the date of recording, 20th of February 2017. Websites and call centre. All forms and publications, including the Candidate Handbook, are available from the New South Wales Electoral Commission website www.elections.nsw.gov.au. The New South Wales Electoral Commission has a candidate call centre. That phone number is 1300 088 942. The Office of Local Government website is www.olg.nsw.gov.au. New South Wales legislation can be found on the www.legislation.nsw.gov.au website. All elections are conducted under the Local Government Act and regulation, and election campaign finance information can be found under the Election Funding, Expenditure and Disclosures Act and regulation. Types of voting. Ordinary voting. We have ordinary voting, which means the elector marks their ballot paper and places it directly in the ballot box. So ordinary voting occurs at pre-poll voting centres, declared institutions such as nursing homes, retirement villas, and polling places on election day. Declaration voting is where an elector is required to complete a declaration on an envelope and place their ballot paper inside the declaration envelope and seal it. Declaration voting occurs for postal voting, silent electors, electors whose name has already been marked as voted, and enrolment voting. It is important to note there is no absent voting or I vote, electronic voting for local council elections. Voting before election day pre-poll. At the returning officer's office, voting for electors enrolled in the council area. Voting will be from Monday for the 2 weeks prior to election day and up to 6 p.m. on the Friday before election day. Electors are required to make a verbal declaration and the ballot paper is placed directly in the ballot box. There may be additional pre-poll voting centres in a council area. These additional centres will operate for the days and hours approved by the Electoral Commissioner. Declared institutions. Voting at declared institutions is for patients and residents only. Declared institutions will be visited by staff from the returning officer's office between the Monday to Friday prior to election day. Electors are required to make a verbal declaration and the ballot paper is placed directly in the ballot box. Please contact the returning officer for advice on when these visits will occur. Voting before election day, postal. Postal voting is managed by the Electoral Commission and the Returning Officer. Postal vote applications close at 5 p.m. on the Monday before Election Day. Applications can be made online. Postal ballot papers will not be available until approximately 3 weeks prior to Election Day following the close of nominations. Completed postal vote ballot papers must be returned to the Returning Officer by 6 p.m. on the Monday after Election Day. Voting on Election Day. Polling places are open at 8 a.m. and close at 6 p.m. on Election Day. An elector can only vote at a polling place located within the council area if the council is undivided, or within a ward if the council has wards that the elector is enrolled in. There is no absent voting at local council elections. Scrutineers. Candidates are entitled to appoint scrutineers to observe the electoral process. A scrutineer must be on the New South Wales electoral roll and can be appointed by any candidate. Candidates cannot be scrutineers in the council area they are contesting. You appoint a scrutineer by completing the Appointment of Scrutineer LG 213 form. Counting the votes on election night. On election night, the polling places will count the ballot papers to the number 1 preference. The Returning Officer in their office will count pre-poll venues, postal votes and declared institution ballot papers. The polling places will telephone the results to the Returning Officer, and the Returning Officer will post the results on our website www.elections.nsw.gov.au. On the Sunday and Monday following Election Day, in the Returning Officer's office, a check count of all ballot papers will occur, and the results will be updated on the New South Wales Electoral Commission website. Distribution of preferences. If no candidate has an absolute majority after a check count, a distribution of preferences will be required. This will commence in the week after Election Day. Please check with the Returning Officer for details. Final results will be updated on the New South Wales Electoral Commission website and candidates advised of the election results. Recounts. The Electoral Commissioner can direct a recount at no cost to a candidate, or alternatively, candidates may request a recount and that must be paid for by the candidate. Any request for a recount must be directed to the Returning Officer. Declaration of results. The Electoral Commissioner will approve the Returning Officer declaring the election. The Returning Officer will advise all candidates of the result. The declaration will be signed by the Returning Officer and the results published on the New South Wales Electoral Commission website www.elections.nsw.gov.au.
Disclosure of donations and expenditure. The official agent is responsible for disclosing donations and electoral expenditure to the Electoral Commission. Disclosures must be made in respect of each candidate, including a person who is a member of a group, mayoral candidates and councillor candidates. Disclosures must also be made in respect of each group of candidates, each elected member of a local council, and each political party. In the case of a political party, though, it's the party agent of the party that is responsible for the party's disclosure. Disclosure is also required by political donors who make reportable political donations. A person who is the official agent for more than one candidate or group must lodge a disclosure form in respect of each candidate and group. Disclosure forms are to include political donations received, political donations made, reportable loans received, electoral expenditure incurred, and details of fundraising ventures and functions, including the net or gross proceeds from each fundraising venture or function. A valid disclosure form is completed using the correct New South Wales Electoral Commission form. It is completed and signed by the official agent, and it's certified by a registered company auditor. Some exemptions may apply for those involved in local government elections, and the disclosure form must be lodged with the Electoral Commission by the due date. Disclosure forms cover a financial year, which is 1 July to 30 June. The due date for lodging a valid disclosure form is the 22nd of September each year, or the 20th of October for political donors. When lodging a disclosure form, you must attach supporting documents. They include the receipt book, which contains copies of receipts that your agent issued to donors for reportable political donations received. Supporting documents also include copies of the advertising and electoral material that relate to your electoral expenditure, and copies of invoices or receipts for your electoral communication expenditure. For a political party, there are additional financial documents that must be lodged with the party's disclosure form. If you are a candidate or group in a financial year, your agent must lodge a disclosure form for that year. For example, if a person registers with the Electoral Commission as a candidate on the 20th of June, a disclosure form must be made in respect of the candidate for that financial year. A subsequent disclosure form must also be made for the following financial year if the election is held in the next financial year. Where there is no appointed agent, the candidate is responsible for lodging their own disclosure form, and in the case of a group, a head candidate of a group is responsible for lodging the group's disclosure form. Elected members. Candidates who are elected are called elected members. Elected members are their own official agent unless an agent is appointed by an elected member after the election. All of the requirements around political donations and electoral expenditure apply in the same way to elected members as for candidates and groups. Refer to Part 3 of this presentation for further information. Disclosure is required in respect of an elected member for each financial year until the person is no longer an elected member. And for the year in which the election is held, there are 2 disclosures that must be lodged. One, in respect of the person's candidacy at the election, and 2, in respect of the person being an elected member. Disclosures and disclosure forms are published by the New South Wales Electoral Commission in November or December each year on our website. That is at www.elections.nsw.gov.au/FD. It is an offence not to lodge a valid disclosure by the due date. Penalties may include a caution, a fine of $1,100 or $2,750 for party agents, or prosecution where the maximum fine is $22,000. The disclosure form includes a declaration to be made by the agent that everything that is required to be disclosed has been disclosed. It is an offence to make a false declaration in a disclosure form when you know that the statement you're making is not true. It is also an offence to enter into a scheme to circumvent the requirements for political donations and electoral expenditure. Allegations and offences. Refer the following matters to the New South Wales Electoral Commission directly. That is, any allegation of a breach or offence under the Election Funding, Expenditure and Disclosures Act or regulation, which includes issues relating to the registration of candidates, groups and agents, and political donations and electoral expenditure. Also refer directly to the Electoral Commission allegations of misuse of enrolment information. Send your allegations to New South Wales Electoral Commission Funding, Disclosure and Compliance Branch, GPO Box 4046, Sydney 2001, or email us at fdc@elections.nsw.gov.au. Refer to the Returning Officer any allegations about unlawful electoral material. Include a copy or photo of the offending material, and the Returning Officer will attempt to resolve the issue with the alleged offender. You can also refer breaches of the Local Government Act to the New South Wales Police for investigation and enforcement. Do not refer any allegations about electoral breaches of the Local Government Act or Local Government Regulation to the Electoral Commission. The Commission has no authority to investigate or enforce these breaches. The New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal, or NCAT, can order the dismissal of a person from civic office after an election. This would be based on irregularities in a person's election, and the court may award costs. A complainant should seek and be guided by their own legal advice as to whether a person should be referred to NCAT. Remember, refer to the election calendar on the New South Wales Electoral Commission website for key dates on the election. There is no absent voting or I vote for local government elections, and scrutineers must be appointed in writing. Remember that valid disclosures of donations and electoral expenditure must be lodged with the Electoral Commission on time. And all forms and publications and further information is available on the Commission's website, www.elections.nsw.gov.au. If you have questions, contact our Candidate Call Centre on 1300 088 942 or refer to detailed information contained in the Candidate Handbook, LG by 200. If you have questions about this presentation, email us at nominations@elections.nsw.gov.au. This concludes the candidate information presentation for local council by-elections.